It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the FinSide. It ain't the left side or the right side.
Thank you, Solo D. Welcome to another episode of On the FinSide here with Kat and Paul. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I'm Brian Cat NFL. Paul is fanatic_pick on Twitter. Paul, before we even begin with the Dolphins' 37-20 loss to the Buffalo Bills, given that we're getting closer to Thanksgiving, closer to the end of the college football season, I thought it would be better to start out with the obvious news here for the Miami Dolphins heading into the draft season, and that is Tua Tagovailoa, Alabama's quarterback, with a major injury this week in the Alabama win over Mississippi State. I mean, this is a game that Alabama was comfortably ahead 35-7, and after having a terrible ankle injury over the last couple of weeks that sidelined him, before the LSU game, he now suffers a dislocated hip, and he's screaming in pain, carted off the field. It looks like that he's going to be, it's not the Bo Jackson broken hip that we saw 30 years ago, but this is kind of a big deal here. And now the Dolphins are sitting here after this loss to Buffalo, picking fourth.
They are, and, it might be a bigger deal. I know we don't think it's the Bo Jackson issue, but at the same time, it could turn into the Bo Jackson issue because that loss of blood flow causes basically to the lower extremity, causes potential degenerative issues down the road. It causes potential arthritic issues that could onset early. I mean, there's a lot of things that this type of injury can cause for a player that can shorten their career. And at quarterback, you don't want a quarterback that's going to have a career shortened. So there's going to be a lot of investigative aspects that really need to go into this Tua injury.
Yeah, I mean, this is still a player that could go number one, but he could start to drop if a lot of teams around the league feel the same way that you do on that. So, I just thought we should mention that to begin with here because we're keeping an eye on the quarterbacks. And, yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation. So looking at the draft order now, after the Dolphins drop this game to the Bills, you've got the Bengals at 1, the Redskins at 2, the Giants at 3, the Dolphins at 4. The Jets win today, so they're at 5. And then you've got the Bucs at 6 and the Broncos at 7. Luckily as well, Paul, around the league, the Steelers lose 21-7 to the Browns. We won't get into the specifics of what happened in that game. And also, too, the Texans get absolutely thrashed today by the Baltimore Ravens that are looking like Super Bowl contenders already.
They are looking like Super Bowl contenders. And the big thing that I'll say here, when it comes to both the Steelers and the Texans, the Steelers are on the outside looking in for the playoffs, and they're going to be without Mike Pouncey for the next few weeks. They may be without their entire wide receiving core, it seems like, for the next several weeks due to injury, not suspension. But, they're a team that's already with their jackass of a backup quarterback. And if they wind up on, 5th and 6th string receivers on top of not having their former Pro Bowl center in Maurkice Pouncey, that could get pretty insurmountable pretty quickly. As far as the Texans go, I think every Dolphin fan out there should be rooting for the Colts to win this coming Thursday night. If the Texans lose, and I think you pointed this out too, it's about a game and a half lead that the Colts will have in the South Division. Texans right now are the number 6 seed for the AFC playoffs. If the Texans lose, it puts them really behind the 8 ball with 5 weeks left of the season for being able to make the playoffs. Buffalo winning today helps potentially push the Texans further down. They've got the Raiders chomping right on their heels. And really, that could give Miami 2 picks in the teens, even if the Steelers do well down the stretch.
After the Colts this Thursday say that they do lose that game, the week after that, they've got the New England Patriots on Sunday Night Football, and you could be looking at a 6-6 record. And then they've got Denver at home, and then they play at Tennessee. And wouldn't it be interesting if Ryan Tannehill in that situation would be tasked with putting the Houston Texans out of the playoffs, because the Texans not only play them in week 15, but week 17 as well. So Texans have two matchups with Ryan Tannehill in the last 3 weeks of the year. So, yeah, right now as it stands, the Dolphins have the number 4 pick, the number 16 pick, and even though Tankathon has the Dolphins picking 25th, I believe they made a mistake, and I think it's 22nd here, because the Colts would be winning the division at this point. So anyway, a lot of that depends on playoff finishes and whether or not you get in the playoffs. But if the Dolphins can end up in a situation where the Texans and the Steelers don't make the playoffs, they're going to have 3 picks in the top 20, and I think that's what we're gearing for at this point. But, Paul, let's take a look at the Bills game here. You know, this started out very, very ugly, as we both know. I mean, and I'll tell you what, Clive Wolford, who was picked up a couple weeks ago, better be walking home, because in 2 of the first 3 offensive drives for the Dolphins, they started inside their own 10 because of holding calls on special teams by Clive Wolford. I was like, this guy's not even supposed to be on the team. But you look at the rest. You look at the rest of the game here. It was pretty sloppy here for the first 20, 25 minutes of the game. I think we're going to have a lot of guys heading to the TNT wall after this one.
A lot of guys could be candidates for the Coke Bus after this one as well.
That's right.
I mean, you know, Coke Bus trumps TNT wall, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. No, I mean, there were some really good individual performances in this one. I know early on in the game, I know I shot you a message about it. The blocking scheme seemed absolutely hosed. And when you've already got a group of players that are, well, CFL standouts pretty much on the offensive line, if your scheme is pretty hosed on top of that, they were just leaving big gaping holes because you saw linemen chasing players. And the Bills had no problem taking advantage of those huge gaping holes that they were leaving. They weren't the good positive gaping holes that you want to see in your run game. They were the big gaping holes of players chasing people and just leaving screwy openings for other defenders to just run right through.
Yeah. The first play of the game from scrimmage, Devin Singletary got the ball, and it looks like Christian Wilkins was handled pretty well in that play by left guard Quentin Spain for a 22-yard run, and that really set the tempo right up front on that first drive. But the Bills only scored 6 points on their first 2 drives, even though, you know, there was that big run, and then there was a punt return back down to the Dolphins 40, so it made it 6-0. You know, the next drive from the Bills, it's a 13-0 game, a long pass to John Brown where he splits between Nick Needham and Bobby McCain, and then Bobby McCain whiffs on the tackle. It's 16-0, 26 minutes into the game, you know, with 4 minutes left, and that's where it starts to get a little bit fun for a while, because on the next drive, Ryan Fitzpatrick connects with Devante Parker for a beautiful 50-yard gain, and the Dolphins punch it in, make it 16-7. And then on the following play, Jason Sanders has an unbelievable onside kick, gets the ball back, and on the first play, Ryan Fitzpatrick drills it right into Alan Hurns for a 20-plus yard gain, and Alan Hurns just flat out drops and fumbles the ball. And the Dolphins, to me, that was the turning point in the game, because after the Bills got the ball back, they immediately marched down the field and make this a 23-7 game. And it seems like the Dolphins were just trying to play catch up from there.
Yeah, Hurns did nothing to justify his extension that he got this week in this game. I mean, you look at before that fumble, he had what easily could have been a big gain that stalled the drive a little bit, where it hit him in the hands and just went careening off of him. And it wasn't like it was out of reach. I mean, it was right where it needed to be, and there was no one around him, and he just boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that was the first.
You know,
that was the first play of the second half there, and if he catches that pass, it's still 23-14 at that point. He catches that pass. That's Dolphins have the ball 1st and 10 at their own 35-yard line, and the fun might continue then. But it seems like the Dolphins kept kicking themselves from that point forward. So, yeah, and also too, Paul, this is a game where defensively it would have really helped to have Xavier Howard and Raekwon McMillan, because they were badly missed in this game because, Devin Singletary had success on the ground at running back, 15 carries, 75 yards, and John Brown absolutely destroyed the Dolphins secondary. He was matched up on Nick Needham for most of the game, but not completely on him. And I thought Needham, given the lack of pass rush, I thought he fought back pretty well, but still, 9 catches, 138 yards from John Brown and 2 touchdowns. So without question, can't wait to get Xavier Howard back next year and Raekwon McMillan back here, hopefully next week.
Completely. I mean, Rake is such a factor in the run game, such an absolute factor, and really, I know I missed him. I mean, I love him. I love Vince Beagle. I didn't miss Taco Charlton too much. I mean, he made about as much of an impact on the stat line as he would have if he was active today. But yeah, the run game really set them up poorly for the passing game, and the fact that there wasn't as much pass rush. Absolutely. John Brown's one of those receivers that is hard to cover if you don't have a pass rush. And Miami was there today, unfortunately. And there were a lot of weird misreads on a lot of plays, too, from the front seven.
Yeah, there was. And, is the two things we keep going back to every week is the offensive line and the pass rush for being the weakest units on the team. This is probably the weakest performance from both of those units here on Sunday in this 37-20 loss to the Bills. So, Paul, let's take a look at the position by position grades here. I'll throw it to you first on Ryan Fitzpatrick and the quarterback position.
I think Ryan Fitzpatrick actually had a pretty okay game today. I mean, threw for over 300 yards. He got sacked way too often. Not a lot of those were on him. I do feel like one kind of was in particular where he just tripped over a player on the ground out of the blue. But, he had a 20-yard run negated by a bogus penalty. He led the team today. And, I mean, you look at the fact that, Devante Parker went 7 for 135. He managed to get Jakeem Grant a little bit involved. He got Albert Wilson involved. Once Patrick Laird came into the game later on, he did a lot of intriguing stuff with Laird. And, Fitzpatrick is leading this team right now, even though I think Josh Rosen might be their quarterback of the future, which is a different topic for a different debate on a different episode, I think. But good on him. I'll give him a solid B+.
It's definitely a topic for another day. I like to see Josh Rosen as the Dolphins' third quarterback, so that they're not drafting one in the middle rounds. But yeah, conversation for another day. As far as Ryan Fitzpatrick, I'm going to go ahead and give him a B+. And the only reason I don't give him higher is because the Dolphins didn't win the game. But I mean, at the end of this, to come away with a stat line against one of the best defenses and secondaries of the league, 32 for 45, over 71% completion percentage, 323 yards. Yeah, he didn't throw a touchdown or an interception, but he very easily could have. But he has a great rhythm there with Devante Parker. Alan Hurns had 4 catches for 53 yards. He has a good rhythm with him too. Alan Hurns just made a lot of mistakes. So for him to do that, I have to give him a B+ as well. At running back, Kalen Ballage is just continuing to get closer and closer to setting unbelievable records. So on the year now, after a 9 carry for 9-yard performance, he on the year has 64 carries for 122 yards, 1.9 yards a carry. And what I think might even be sadder is he has 13 catches for 50 yards on the year, which is not even a great yards per carry average. So I liked when Patrick Laird got in the game. He caught 6 passes for 51 yards. Granted, it was junk time and they were dump offs, but that's kind of where the bar is set here at the running back position. So, I feel bad for Balash. He's just not good enough, and I'm again counting down the days till he's cut from this roster. So, 9 carries for 9 yards, leading running back. I have to give the position an F.
Now, the thing that makes that 9 carries for 9 yards worse, which sounds unimaginable, is the fact that Kalen Ballage had a long of 7 on one of his runs today. So if you take away that one big 7-yard run that he had, you're talking about 8 carries, 2 yards.
And Paul, I have a question. Do you know what play they were running when Ballage had that 7-yard carry?
Oh Jesus, I'm blanking on it right now.
Oh, it was a wildcat play. So as soon as that happened, I was
shut
like,
up, no.
I was like, oh my God, that if Ballage didn't infuriate you before, then he definitely has to now.
I think I blacked out at that point. I'm pretty sure I blacked out for that play. As soon as I saw him line up in the wildcat, I just started twitching, laying on the floor, foam coming out of the mouth. Somebody hit me with some glacier water, and I jumped back up, but the play was over at that point. So I missed it.
Yes. So what are you grading the running back spot?
Only because of Patrick Laird and the exciting things that I saw from him at the end of the game. I'll give it a very, very low D-. Only because I think this coaching staff latched onto something with Laird late in the game that I think we're going to see more of down the stretch.
Yeah, and I hope they do, because if he's playing that Danny Woodhead type role with this offense, it allows Fitzpatrick with this offensive line to get the ball out of his hands quicker. And I think that's a no-brainer going forward. It's a no-brainer to play literally anybody. And I'm not exaggerating. You could pull somebody off the street tomorrow. Alfred Morris is out there. I mean, tell me you take Ballage over Alfred Morris? There's no way. I mean, so
Can I take you over Kalen Ballage at running back?
No, thanks, man. I appreciate it. I would
It's
take. It's
not really a compliment, but it's.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Wide receiver and tight end. I'll throw it back to you on that.
Kind of a weekday from Mike Gesicki, and that's where I'm going to start. He left a few plays out on the field on his 2 misses on targets. They could have been they weren't right in his breadbasket, but you know what? They were the spectacular catches that when you're a receiving tight end, that they want to fill all your measurables and leaping ability and size and length and strength and catching ability. You've got to come down with those plays, especially if you can't block worth ass. And, you also look at Devante Parker would have scored on that reception easily if Mike Gesicki literally just stood in the guy's way. He didn't even have to block him. Make him run around you, and he's not going to catch Parker before he hits the end zone. I mean, total weak sauce on that one from Gesicki. Hopefully we see him return to his developing form next week. But for this week, he kind of burned me a little bit. But on the positive side of the house, actually, you know what? One more negative first, because I haven't bashed this guy enough in this show after his brand new shiny contract. Alan Hurns continues to be somebody I don't want on the roster next year, and I know he signed an extension. It's disappointing. I mean, it's not good enough. I'd rather see Jakeem Grant and Albert Wilson out there, who got a little more involved today, but Jakeem Grant and Devante Parker really just had a field day out there on offense. Jakeem was utilized as that Swiss Army knife we want to see from him, adding a 7-yard rushing touchdown. We won't even get into what he did on special teams till later in the episode. And then you look at what Devante Parker did, his 7 for 135, should have had a touchdown on that 50-yarder. Just absolutely special what we've got there with Devante Parker at this point. Some words I never thought I'd say, especially heading into this year.
Well, right now, Devante Parker is on pace for 64 catches, 966 yards, and 6 touchdowns for the year. I mean, so these aren't Pro Bowl numbers, but you look at the last couple of weeks, he's turned it on more and more each week. He has 7 catches, 135 yards in this game, and that 50-yarder that he caught completely turned the game around. And you're right, Mike Gesicki, if he throws a block downfield where it's just him and one other guy and he's lollygagging out there, Parker walks into the end zone. Alan Hurns is somebody that's grown on me a lot, but he had his chance in this game to show that he earned that contract extension, and he blew it. I mean, he caught that pass over the middle. I mean, if he breaks that tackle, goes to the end zone, and it's a 16-14 game, we're talking about Alan Hurns with 4 catches for 70 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Instead, he drops the ball. He doesn't catch another pass for the rest of the game. In fact, he dropped a key one that I talked about before on the first play of the third quarter, too. So, such a shame there for Alan Hurns. Yeah, and Jakeem Grant, good for him. I mean, it's the last couple of weeks he's been having these, 30, 35-yard games, and he completely explodes in this for an unbelievable kick return. And he also actually he had every touchdown but a receiving touchdown in this. But it's good to see him start to break out there. He can do some electrifying things, that's for sure. Mike Gesicki, 4 catches for 18 yards. I would have loved if he had padded the stat line at the end when it was 4th and 16 on one of the last plays of the game, where he went up high and was so close to pulling down about a 30-yard catch, but it was not to be on that. He was open a few other times, though. I will give him credit for that. What I'm really disappointed in at the tight end spot, though, is where is Durham Smythe and where is Clive Wolford, except for creating terrible penalties on special teams. So overall with the receiving unit, Devante Parker, Devante Parker and Jakeem Grant, if we count them as, if we count the special teams into this, overall, there are a lot of ups and downs there. So I'm going to go with a B+, very simply because Fitzpatrick threw for 320 plus yards and Parker had 135 of them.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it's the other aspect too, and I didn't give you a grade yet. Is I'll echo you on the B+. For me, it's a little different. I'm not going to incorporate the special teams yet, but I will say the thing that pulled it down for me was the tight end play. The fact that and the play you mentioned with Mike Gesicki in particular, things like that. The Alan Hurns play. Those are things that drove the grade down for me. Were Hurns and Gesicki in this one. And yeah, you're right. We didn't see Durham Smythe much or do much. And all we saw from Clive Wolford was him trotting around out there on special teams, giving everybody hugs. So, which you can't do. So yeah, it's unfortunately the tight end and Alan Hurns pulled this down for me a little bit.
I'm going to go with a B. Actually, you just talked me into it. I'm taking it down half a letter grade on that too. So you want to stick with a B+, or you want to join me with a B?
No, I'm not a follower. I'm a leader. I just talked you down. I'm not talking me down.
All right, whatever. Offensive line, moving along. I mean, this was bad. And I said before the game that, again, we've gotten to the point where I was very excited to get Julianne Davenport back in the fold. This is a player that came to Miami in the Laramie Tunsil Kenny Stills trade, and he's somebody who has a lot of physical raw potential, but is pretty tall and pretty stiff too. And he was a 4th-round pick out of Bucknell, so he's definitely a raw player. But man, it was bad today for him. I mean, it was blown assignment after blown assignment. In fact, really the first play from scrimmage was a 5-yard loss by Kalen Blage, and that's not something I blame Blage for, because Julianne Davenport just flat out forgot to block the very defensive end he was tasked with on this one. So not good on that. I have to look a little more closely at Michael Dieter and the rest of the interior offensive line. Jesse Davis on the third drive basically ruined that sequence with by letting up a sack to Lorenzo Alexander, almost letting up a second one too. Again, please move this guy back into right guard next year and stop having to play at right tackle. Evan Boehm at right guard really got screwed on one play. Not only was he called for a holding penalty when the Dolphins were down 23-14, but he also pancaked the guy he pancaked Ed Oliver on that play. It was called for holding. I don't know what you're looking at, but that completely changed the momentum of the game. The Dolphins were down 23-14 early in the third quarter there, and instead of it being a 21-yard Ryan Fitzpatrick run, it's 2nd and 20, and the Dolphins are completely screwed on that drive. Matt Hawkshacks a punt. A couple of plays later, the Bills score on the next drive, and now it's 30-14, and the game's pretty much out of reach. So offensive line pressure all day long, and not to mention 9 carries for 9 yards for Kalen Ballage. So I have to give this unit an F.
Yeah, when the best thing I can say about the unit on the day is Evan Boehm got screwed. It's not a good day at the office. I mean, and this was so bad that during the game, all I could think is, for our listeners out there who have been critical of the fact that we've said things about wanting to sign Jack Conklin or spend money out there on Brandon Scherf, spend money on this free agent or that free agent for the offensive line, what I will tell you there is, as important as getting that quarterback of the future is for this team, if Miami does not spend on free agency to build at least the majority of the starting positions on this offensive line, I hate to break it to you, but to build a starting caliber offensive line, they're going to have to use so many early draft resources, and not only that, add a pass rusher, that it's going to be ridiculously ugly with any rookie quarterback or any veteran quarterback behind this offensive line, the way that these a-holes played today. And it's disgusting, and an F for me as well.
Yeah, and not to go down a rabbit hole with Jack Conklin, but some of the people I respect the most on Twitter that I talk to, they're Dolphins bloggers, Dolphins fans. 3 or 4 of them have said they want nothing to do with Jack Conklin. I'm like, well, I don't understand this, because with some Dolphins, the standards they have for the right tackle position are unbelievable. Same people wanted nothing to do with re-signing Juwan James. Like, right tackle is a position that has flat out ruined games for the Dolphins. Jesse Davis, Mark Colombo, Jonathan Martin, Tyson Clabo. It's like, wouldn't you rather just pay somebody like Jack Conklin, who's 25 years old and is at least good, $10 million a year, when the Dolphins are a team that right now have so much money that they're basically spending $4 or $5 million to buy mid-round picks? Doesn't make any sense. If you can plug a Joe Thuney, who's going to be a free agent for the Patriots, and a Jack Conklin, then you can then push those resources at center and right guard, or push those other offensive lineman resources to center, to right guard, and to depth. And now you draft a left tackle to hopefully complete the line. So, but either way, it's a long way of me saying this offensive line may not have more than 1 or 2 players that should even be mentioned as a starting caliber player anywhere after this year.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to see a little bit of Isaiah Prince just to see what we've got as this season wears on. He can't be any worse. I mean, we need to see what we've got in Isaiah Prince before the season's over, so Miami knows what they really need to do in the off season. You can't always get that full feel for somebody at practice. I know he needs to get stronger, but if he's at least out there with the proper technique, looking the part, and then just like, okay, he got pushed over a couple of times, all we need to do is get him stronger. We're good. At least you have your answer there. I mean, you've already got your answer as far as anybody you've walked out at right tackle besides him this year. Not good enough. And so let's see if Isaiah Prince is. And then, you know what? If he looks the part and all he needs to do is get stronger, they can take care of that in the offseason. Maybe you don't need to sign Jack Conklin. But otherwise, you need to sign Jack Conklin. Sorry.
Yeah, or you're going to be spending a first-round pick at right tackle, and that's exactly what I don't want the Dolphins doing. I want them to spend them on other positions. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, Isaiah Prince does need to add weight, but at least he has the physical tools, and I think that's the type of player we should be taking a good look at here the rest of the year. I mean, to see if Prince and Jesse Davis on the right side of the line can play well together. Paul, let's look at the defensive side of the ball here. This was certainly a troubling day for the defense. They could not stop Josh Allen. They could not stop the Buffalo Bills offense. There's something about Josh Allen playing in Miami where they just flat out can't stop anything that he's doing. I mean, but luckily, I think it was exposed that the Dolphins defensively. I mean, we know they have a talent issue, but it went much further than that in this game. So the main thing is when we take a look at the front seven here, they couldn't get a hand on anybody the entire game. I mean, Vince Beagle's had a heck of a year so far, and he did get a couple of pressures there, but the Bills very clearly made him a priority there at that spot. And the rest of the guys, Charles Harris, had a couple of good games. He was fine in run defense, but not much pressure there on the quarterback when he was expected to. Avery Moss struggled badly with trying to track Josh Allen on any run plays. And just as usual, Christian Wilkins and Davin Gotcha were the usual solid, sturdy selves right there in the middle. After the first 22-yard run by Devin Singletary, I think the run defense stayed in their lanes a little bit better throughout as the game progressed, so good for them. But also badly missed Raekwon McMillan at linebacker because, Jerome Baker is who he is. I mean, he's got to be a part-time player. And when Raekwon wasn't in there, he was the one, going nose to nose with the centers and the rest of the offensive linemen. They're on those run plays. So, but the front seven, the inability to stop the run at the beginning of the game, the inability to get pressure on the quarterback on any kind had as much to do with this loss as anything. So I'm going to go with a D.
I'm going to go with a D plus. Like you alluded to, Davin Godchow and Christian Wilkins did have some bright moments in this one. Jerome Baker had some forgettable moments and some good moments. Sam McGuavin actually showed up a little bit today at times. And Charles Harris probably would have had a sack if he didn't get egregiously held. So, I mean, it was nice to see a little bit of that positive development from Charles Harris. But like you said, Vince Beagle, they prioritized shutting him down in this one. Missed the hell out of Raekwon McMillan. And really, Avery Moss, Jesus, I keep flashing back to the read option that Josh Allen made the wrong call on when he read the defensive end. He absolutely made the wrong call. And Avery Moss looked at him as he tucks the ball away, and you could see he was tucking the ball away, and you could see the ball from 3 different angles at the very least, including the one that Avery Moss had. And Avery Moss looked at him, had him dead to rights, and went, oh, he doesn't have the ball, and turned back inside and pretty much ran right past him to go in and tackle the guy he didn't hand it off to.
Yeah.
What a Mr. Magoo ugly ass moment that was. So yeah, D- for me.
Defensive back, we've been impressed with this unit considering they don't have Xavier Howard. Minka Fitzpatrick was traded. Rashad Jones has been hurt, and he was back here today. So, I have to attribute a lot of the errors on defense here today to the lack of pass rush, not necessarily the defensive backs themselves. I mean, I didn't see a lot of blown coverages. I mean, look, that first touchdown to John Brown was huge. It made the game 13-0. He beat Nick Needham. Bobby McCain didn't get over fast enough. That was a big one. And overall, John Brown had a huge day. But if you look after John Brown, who had 9 for 128 or 138 and 2 touchdowns, or 1 touchdown or 2, I'll check the stat line. But
John Brown had 2.
John Brown had 2. Gotcha. Yeah. So 9 for I think 128 here, and 9 for 137 and 2 touchdowns. A lot of them came off Nick Needham, but he was unfairly put in one-on-one coverage on an island with him a lot. And I'll say this: Nick Needham fought back. There's no doubt about it, because there were a lot of times he boxed off John Brown when the ball was thrown to him. And also too, he came back and had a forced fumble on Devin Singletary that fortunately fell into the Bills' hands there on that fumble recovery. But so you've got that. Rashad Jones came back, was pretty uneventful. But my biggest bone to pick, and we've been going back and forth on this all year, is to me Bobby McCain exemplified in this game why I don't want him playing free safety. He couldn't tackle. He couldn't cut. He couldn't tackle anybody today, and he was too late to get to a certain spot. You look at the three really biggest plays in the game when John Brown had his first touchdown. Bobby McCain gets over there and can't make the tackle to stop him at least the 10-yard line. Josh Allen, the one that we talked about where Avery Moss was doing God knows what. Bobby McCain comes down and he can't tackle him in the open field, and that's the job as the last line of defense. And also too, Dawson Knox, the rookie out of Mississippi State, caught about a 15-yard pass, breaks a tackle on McCain, takes it to the house to make it 23-7 Bills at that point. Terrible, terrible game by Bobby McCain. I want to see. I like McCain, but I want to see him play more in the slot here next year. So when you look at Josh Allen's stat line, even with the lack of pass rush, at the end of the day, you've still got Josh Allen 21 for 33, 256, 3 touchdowns. It's hard for me to give them any better than a C- here because I don't completely blame them. I more blame the pass rush.
I blame the pass rush, but I will say one of the biggest jobs your safeties have, aside from pass coverage in its defense with the 3 safety look, is you have to be providing run support. And when they're continually whiffing on tackles, one thing I do want to say with McCain is I wonder how much that early, I won't say injury, but pretty well, you know what, I will. How much the early injury he had in the game set him up for failure, because he did come out at least one other time kind of nursing the same area. So that'll be interesting to monitor as the week goes on, what we hear about that. But again, it's just, Needham did respond, I thought, and responded well. There were some bright spots along with a dumb penalty or two. I can give these guys a C. Even though a lot of people are probably going to turn their heads and go, how do you give these guys a C? You know what? They actually did pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, I still think that if you get a pass rush in front of them, this game turns out a lot differently there at defensive back. Special teams is usually something we kind of glance over toward the end, and not this week. I mean, I would argue, Paul, before I throw it to you for the grade on this could be 2 of the best special teams plays of the year for the Dolphins, with the Jakeem Grant kick return and the Jason Sanders onside kick to himself.
Oh, completely. I mean, Jason Sanders' onside kick to himself was a thing of beauty, and then Jakeem, oh man, I've been waiting to see this all year. It does make it look a little bit goofy that he hasn't been returning as much as we'd hope. But again, this was Jakeem Grant's coming out party, and you know what? Jason Sanders just re-endeared himself to Dolphins fans when the Colonel kicked that onside kick, caught him off guard, and recovered it himself, and it was hilarious. He had so much time, he literally trotted alongside the ball and waited for it to go far enough before falling on the ball himself. I mean, that's how much he took the Bills receiving team off guard. I'll give the special teams an A- in this one. Clive Walford, you can't pull this down too far. We're sticking in the A territory with an A- here. No, A. We'll give him an A. Screw you, Clive Walford, but we'll give everybody else an A.
I'm going to give him a B, and I'll tell you why.
No.
Because I have to. Because I'll tell you what, based on those 2 amazing plays, I want to give him an A+. But nobody is more responsible for the hole the Dolphins were put in than this guy that shouldn't even be on the team, Clive Walford. Because with those 2 penalties, it had the Dolphins starting out inside their own 10-yard line on 2 of the first 3 drives. And when you look at it being a 16-0 Bills lead after the first 25 minutes of the game, that takes it down dramatically. And also, too, there were 2 really good punt returns by Andre Roberts, one of which was returned to the Dolphins 40, one was returned right around to midfield. So there were a lot of great plays. There were a lot of gaffes in this one, too. And I think the gaffes may have ended up overall hurting them just as much as these 2 big plays by Sanders and Jakeem Grant. So I'm going to go with a B on that. unit there. So you've got a B, you have an A, I have a B. I'm going to throw it back to you for your player of the game and your Coke Bus player of the game to wrap it up.
There were a couple of good candidates for player of the game here, but I'm going to go with the man we just talked about. Jakeem Grant is my player of the game. His little coming out party in this one. The kickoff return in the 11th hour when it looked like it was going to, basically the game was going to go out of reach to pull them back within range. I've got to go Jakeem on the player of the game. As far as a Coke Bus player, I'll stick with special teams because Clive did put him in a hole, and Clive shouldn't be on this roster. I remember all preseason talking about how bad I did not want Clive back. And sure enough, there he is out there hugging people like crazy and causing issues. So Jakeem's my player of the game. Clive's my Coke Bus player.
My player of the game, I think Grant's an obvious one, and I would have picked that one too. Got to give it to Devante Parker. Other than that, I mean, seven catches, 135 yards. I mean, when you look at the contract he signed, which no one expected him to, 2 years, $13 million, that's looking like a steal right now. But what I really like, and I saw this when I was at the Colts game last week, is the passion that he has suddenly started showing. Just the verbal, the nonverbals. Like last week when the Dolphins didn't put the ball in the air when Josh Rosen was at quarterback and Parker was one-on-one, he was irate on the sidelines and in the huddle. I mean, and not in a bad way, but he wanted the ball. And you look at how he carries himself now, just from my perspective, I think you're starting to see a little bit more of a new player here as he continues to season in the NFL. My Coke Bus player of the game is a very easy one for me. That's Bobby McCain. I mean, yeah, I think the injury may have had something to do with it, and he did toughen it out, but I can't resist saying over and over again, I don't think this guy should be playing free safety. I'd like to see him move down into the nickel spot next year. Then Jamal Wiltz can be the fourth defensive back, and I think he's been playing pretty well too. But safety is going to be very high on my needs list here this year, and I might be in favor of them having Eric Rowe at strong safety because I think he's been playing pretty well overall. So that will do it for our breakdown of the Miami Dolphins 37-20 loss to the Buffalo Bills. You can follow Paul and I on Facebook, Twitter, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. I am Brian Cat NFL. Paul is fanatic_pick. And if it's not on the right side and it's not on the left side, it is on the fin side. Solo D, take us home.
It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. It ain't the left side or the right side, then it must be the fin side. Listen, Dolphins fans across the land all tuning in to see what